did you get into running Lowlines?
I wanted cattle. My wife was quite insistent that it wasn't going to have a horn and it had to be tractable and easily managed, so we looked at a smaller breed to start with, and one that was naturally polled, and these were it. I managed to take her across to an established stud, and as the animals walked up and she said, "Oh yes, they're not too bad, you can have those," so I did.
Yeah, there will be those who would suggest that they're probably more decorative than useful because of a carcass.
A lot of them would look at that, but no, in fact, they have a very good killing percentage. I've got some figures I could show you at home. The cutting percentages out are very, very high. The main difference between them is the shorter stature, not in the body frame, but in the shorter leg, and there's not much fillet steak on a shin bone. And you know, this girl here, she's only 3 years old, but you look at the depth of her, and the springer rib, they've got a fair frame on them, and the boys have got good muscling, as you'll see next door. But the biggest problem probably is for us in terms of selling them is that it's still a live weight based payment. So, I mean, you're not getting the live weight across there because you haven't got those big, heavy leg bones in them that you'd get, say, in a Friesian cross steer. And they'll give you more for a Friesian cross steer than they will for these, although they've got more marbling and a better killing out percentage.
Marbling?
Marbling fat through the meat, which is both for taste and for tenderness. The Angus are renowned for their marbling. That's probably why McDonald's have got Angus. But no, Angus are very good for marbling, and it's just the fine streams of fat through the meat which both give it a flavour and also a tenderness. And,
so they came from what we know now as Angus.
Yes. These are probably closer to the original Crofters Angus from Scotland. In fact, if I've got a photograph somewhere at home of the Queen Mum, who you might remember only stood about yay high, presenting the Supreme Champion Angus at the Edinburgh show back in the 50s, and you can see her standing across the back of this Angus bull, and that's where they were up until around about the 50s. And then, particularly with American influence, they've been breeding up and getting bigger. Getting that leg involved. And yes, an overall weight gain, I'd agree, over the original Crofters Angus. But these were stabilised in Australia at Tringy Research Institute, which is the equivalent of our Ruakura, our government-funded research institute. They were looking for animals that would take hard country, particularly up in Queensland, Northern Territory. They were looking at feed conversion rates, and that's why they got 3 herds in, 2 from Canada and 1 from Scotland, of purebred Angus, ran them off the truck, judged them on the midline, the high line and the low line, and that's how they got the name. And they would close those herds off and started doing grazing trials with them. They very soon stopped with the high line because all the commercial breeders were trying to breed up, take their biggest bulls over their biggest cows and breed that way. So they kept the midline as a control and stabilised the low line. And after about 12, 14 years, they decided, yes, we've got all the figures we need. They are a good feed conversion, and they've got about a 10-day shorter gestation period. We know all that now, we'll get rid of them. We've done the experiment. Some very clever Australian graziers over there decided that was a bit of a waste. So they actually bought not only the lowline herd, all the semen and embryo stock they had available, all the records, and established the lowline breed. And it is now a closed breed. And you can't actually just take another small Angus and put a lowline bull over it and breed up, because it won't be registered. Every animal to be registered has to be DNA parent verified back to parents that are both in the herd book. So it's basically a closed herd. But here, now we've got it, Australia, New Zealand, England, Canada, and America are the main parts where it's gone. The Americans are taking it up. As you say, they are a pretty lifestyle type animal for a lot of those. I hesitate to use the word pet, but I mean we've got 200.
They've got the temperament of a pet.
They've got the temperament of a pet, yes. But we've got over 200 on the place here, and I don't have 200 pets. They're a commercial proposition.
Are you using them as a terminal sire?
We're using them as follow-up sires mainly in the dairy industry. Again, it goes back to that shorter gestation. I thought when I first started trying out markets in the dairy industry, they would be interested in the smaller fetal size, the smaller calf. Normally our calves are around about the 18 kgs, 25 kg is a very big calf, and I thought they'd be using them over their heifers for calving ease. But they actually preferred, or their heifers are indeed the frontline genetics. So they're not going to cross those unless they need to. They tend to do AI or pure dairy stock. But they do use these as a follow-up on them. And we've got a breeder up in Calverton who was convinced he had his heifers all synchronised for AIing, and he was putting jerseys over them because he wanted more butterfat in his milk. That was his way. They did the AIs all on a Friday morning, and on the following Tuesday he put out his follow-up bulls, which are the lowies he got from us, and he was delighted to report that he had 4 black calves on the ground before he had his first Jersey calf. And that convinced him that there is an advantage in terms of shorter gestation, which means, of course, the milk's in the vat a week earlier, and he's got an extra week's income.
What's the difference between a lowline and a Dexter?
Between an Irishman and a Scotsman, for a start. These are Scots-born, and they go back to the Angus. The Dexter is an Irish animal, but both had the same sort of genesis. They were the original crofters or small farmers animal. They were both multi-purpose, but the main difference now is the Dexter is still very genuinely multi-purpose, so it's got good milking capability, but doesn't have the same amount of meat on the frame that you get on these. These still have good milking, but they'll carry 3 calves on them, and they're good mothers to do that with. But their main difference is just in the appearance. The Dexter is a finer, lighter sort of animal than this, and of course it has horns.